When I first heard the heavy steps in the thicket, my breath caught in my chest because I realized it wasn't a person. I had gone into the forest that morning for nothing more than a handful of berries. The air smelled of pine and damp earth, and the silence was the kind that makes you feel like you are the last living soul in the world. I was walking slowly, basket in hand, when my foot slipped. At first, I thought it was just a root, but then the ground gave way, and in a single terrifying moment, I was down. My leg was caught. The pain came fast and sharp, so deep it stole my voice. When I looked, I saw the rusted jaws of an old trap clenched around my ankle. Some hunter must have left it there decades ago, forgotten under the moss and fallen needles. But it hadn't forgotten me. I screamed. My voice tore through the trees, echoing back at me like the cry of another wounded animal. I screamed again and again, until my throat was raw and my chest ached. No one answered. No one came. The silence pressed against me like a weight. My hands trembled as I clawed at the trap, but the iron was unmovable, biting into my flesh every time I pulled. Blood was already soaking my sock, seeping into the dirt beneath me. That was when I heard it. At first, it was faint, just a crack of branches, the shifting of weight in the undergrowth. My heart leapt. For a moment, I thought, a person. Someone heard me. I would be saved. But then came the sound of hooves, heavy, steady, deliberate. I froze. My pulse hammered in my ears. No person walked like that. Through the screen of trees, a shadow emerged, vast, tall, antlers wide as branches, catching flecks of light between the leaves. It was a moose, a great bull moose, the kind you hear about, but almost never see. He stopped a few paces away and looked at me. Not past me, not through me, at me. And in that look, my fear tangled with something else, something I couldn't name. My chest tightened. My breath came shallow. I was pinned there not only by the trap, but by his gaze. I thought he would turn and vanish, melt back into the forest like a ghost. That's what wild things do when they meet humans, isn't it? They leave, but he didn't. Instead, the moose took a step closer. The ground shook faintly beneath his weight. His nostrils flared. He lowered his head, antlers like a crown of branches swaying above him. I could smell the musk of him, raw and earthy, like the very heart of the woods. Fear swelled in me again. I pressed my back against the dirt, as far from him as I could manage, though I had nowhere to go. My voice shook when I whispered, "Go, please, go." But he stayed. He only stood there, looking. His eyes were dark, but not empty. They carried something I still can't explain, something too human, too knowing. A tear slid down my cheek before I realized I was crying. In that moment, I thought, perhaps he smells the blood. Perhaps he will charge, finish me, trample me into the earth. That would be easy for him. One movement, and I would be gone. My body trembled so hard that the trap rattled against the bone of my ankle. The sound made me wince. Still, he didn't move. The forest seemed to hold its breath with me. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, just an animal's curiosity, just a wild thing drawn by the scent of fear, nothing more. But deep down, I already knew it was not nothing, because he didn't leave, and the way he stood there, the way he lowered his head just slightly, as though to see me better. It felt as though he had come not by accident, but for a reason. A shiver ran up my spine. I thought I had reached the end of my strength. I thought I would lie there, until either the forest or the pain swallowed me whole. And yet, here was this creature, filling the silence with his presence, holding me in place with eyes that seemed too full of thought. For a moment, I believed he would stay until I stopped breathing, that he would watch over me as if guarding. I don't know how long we stayed like that, staring at each other, woman and beast, neither moving, both caught in something neither of us understood. Finally, he shifted his weight. His hooves struck the ground softly, and I thought, this is it. He will leave now. He will disappear into the thicket, and I will never see him again. But I was wrong. I thought he would turn away the moment he caught the sharp scent of my blood. I thought he would vanish like smoke, but it turned out this was only the beginning. He didn't turn away. He stepped closer and struck the ground with his hoof, not wild, not angry, measured, like he was testing something I couldn't see. The thud ran through the dirt and up my bones. I flinched and threw my hands over my face, bracing for the crush I was sure would come. I told myself this was the end, that he would stamp the life out of me without even meaning to. I thought it was over already, but it wasn't. He pawed again, a clean stroke just beside the rusted jaws that had my ankle. The earth loosened. Needles and dry leaves slid down the side of the hole. He circled a half step, hooves careful, as if he were drawing a boundary around the trap. Then he lowered that great head and threaded one tine of his antlers under a snarl of sticks. With a slow lift, he pried them up and tossed them aside. Branches clacked together and fell. He did it again. Lift, toss, clear. I stared, mouth open, breath coming in small gasps. He was not coming for me. He was clearing the way to me. My mind couldn't keep up. I kept whispering, "No, no, please," as if that could stop him from hurting me, even while some part of me begged him to continue. His shoulder muscles rippled under his coat as he worked. He wasn't frantic. He wasn't spooked. He looked diligent, determined. Each move had care in it, a purpose I could feel, but not name. He eased his muzzled face toward the metal and drew in a breath. The heat of him touched my skin. I smelled the raw green scent of leaves and bark on his whiskers. Tears spilled before I could stop them. "Help me," I said out loud, the words small and broken. "Please help me." I didn't believe an animal could understand that, but I said it anyway, because there was no one else to hear me. He shifted his weight back and brought his hoof down near the hinge of the trap, not on it, but next to it, pressing the dirt with a careful grinding motion. I cried out when the iron bit deeper from the pressure, and he froze. He lifted his head, ears pricked, eyes on my face. He waited. The pain rolled through me in waves and then eased. He kept watching, like he was reading me. He looked at me as if I were one of his herd. Something in me broke open. My fear didn't leave, but it stood shoulder to shoulder with something like awe, and both of them flooded me at once. "I'm here," I whispered, though I didn't know who I was answering. My hands shook so hard I could barely hold the edge of the hole. He stepped to the other side, picked at the mat of roots with the tips of his antlers, levered them upward, and tossed them clear. Each crack of fiber sounded loud as a gunshot in that quiet. He raked again and again until the earth around the trap began to crumble, widening the lip. Dirt fell in clumps. Pine needles slid like a small landslide. He nosed aside a broken limb, then braced, then lifted. He was making a path, not with hands, but with all he had. I watched his eyes, dark and steady, and wondered what story lived behind them. Had he seen a trap before? Had he learned the feel of iron in the ground? Had something in his life taught him that pressure here mattered, that a lift there meant release? The questions spun in my head, dizzying. I had no answers. I only had the sight of him working, patient as rain. He tried the hoof again, more delicate this time. He set it down like a careful finger. The metal creaked, and the hinge shifted a hair. Pain flared, and I grabbed the frame with both hands to keep from jerking my leg. He lifted, waited, listened to me breathe. He tested, then drew back. It was as if he were learning the trap the way you learn a door that sticks, little by little, feeling where it wants to give. "Good," I whispered without thinking, like I would to a child. "Good, good." My voice shook. The forest felt close, like the trees themselves had leaned in. A jay shrieked above us, and he raised his head, body going tall and still. He smelled the air, wide nostrils flaring, then returned to the edge, placed his hoof even closer, and pushed the soil outward with a slow, grinding sweep. More dirt sloughed off. The ring around the trap opened another inch. My foot had a breath more room, the iron less grip on flesh. I could feel cool air on skin the metal had hidden. "Don't stop," I begged, and the begging shamed me and didn't shame me at all. I was an old woman talking to a wild king, and all my pride had bled out into the earth. He paused. He looked at me again, and I felt heat flood my face because there was meaning in that look I didn't know how to carry. It said, "Stay." It said, "I see you." It said, "You are mine to guard for this moment, and I won't leave until I choose." He nudged a thick branch toward me with the flat of his antler, as if offering a brace. I reached for it with clumsy hands and dragged it closer, set it under my palm, tried to lift myself a little to take pressure off the ankle. The trap scraped. I gasped. He stopped at once. He waited for my breathing to settle, like a nurse. Time lost its shape. There was only his steady labor, my shallow breaths, the iron's slow complaints, the forest watching. A fly landed on my cheek, and I let it crawl because I was afraid to move. He worked on, patient. How could any of this be happening? How could I be here, and he be doing this? Then, as if we had hit some edge only he could sense, he stepped back. 1, 2 paces. He raised his head. He listened to the forest in a way I couldn't. His ears turned toward a sound I didn't hear. My chest tightened. "No," I said. "Don't go, please." He looked once more into me, and in that look I felt the strangest certainty that he had decided something. And then he slid into the trees, tall body dissolving into shadow and branch, the crown of his antlers the last to vanish. Cold rushed up my spine. The forest was wider and emptier than before. I told myself it was finished, that whatever mercy I'd been given had passed. I decided it was all over. I was alone again, but before my tears even dried, I heard the crack of branches, closer, heavier, and he came back. He came back, but he wasn't alone. A smaller shape ghosted after him, unsteady on long legs, ears too big for its head, fur the color of wet straw. For a heartbeat, I thought my eyes were failing me, that the blood loss and the fear had conjured a picture I wanted to see. I told myself I was imagining it, that nothing more could happen now. But then, the little one stumbled into a shaft of light, and I saw the white on its muzzle. It was real. The great moose stopped beside the hole and turned, not to me, but to the calf. He swung his head with a slow, deliberate motion, like a teacher pointing at a lesson. The calf blinked at me, then at him, then inched forward, knees wobbling, hooves finding their courage one careful step at a time. I forgot the trap. I forgot the bite of iron and the hot pulse in my ankle. All I could feel was my heart crashing against my ribs, because this should not be. Wild mothers don't bring their young near people. Wild fathers don't bring anyone. And yet here he was, bringing this small, breathing piece of his world right to me. I pressed my back harder into the dirt to make myself smaller, safer. "Don't," I whispered, "to the big one or the small one, or maybe to the whole forest. Don't come closer. I'm not safe." The moose flicked an ear but did not move away. His eyes were on me, steady, measuring, and then on the trap, and then on the calf. It felt like he was telling the little one, "Look, see, this is danger. This is what the ground can do." The calf stretched its neck, nostrils fluttering, scenting the metal and the blood and the salt of my skin. It took another step. Its ribs trembled with breath. The world narrowed to that small face, the soft whiskers, the wide dark eyes. I lifted my hand without thinking, slow as a leaf falling. My fingers shook. The calf flinched and then, as if remembering the big one's presence, leaned forward and touched my palm with its tongue. Warm, wet, gentle. A sound came out of me that was half laugh, half sob. I didn't cry from pain. I cried because something had opened in the world that I had not known could open. I looked up at the moose, and what I saw there was not rage. It was not wild fear. It was care. I was afraid he would simply finish me, that he would crush me into the earth without a thought. But in his eyes I found no anger, only a kind of watchfulness that broke me. He looked at me like I was part of his herd. He stepped closer, placing himself at an angle that shielded the calf from the underbrush. He smelled the air in long, thoughtful draws, ears swiveling to catch sounds I couldn't hear. Then he leaned down again to the ragged circle of earth where he had worked before. With one antler tine, he lifted a mat of needles and flung it aside, then scraped at the loosened soil with the edge of his hoof. He was not done. He had brought his calf to witness, and he kept working. "Don't watch this," I told the little one, ridiculous words for a ridiculous moment. The calf huffed a breath against my wrist and took another lick, quick and shy, as if to say, "I'm here." The touch lit my skin like a blessing. I thought, this is it. This is the gift. This is the last sweetness before the end. If I die here, at least I felt this. But the big one wasn't finished with me or with the lesson. He nudged a branch toward my free hand again, as if reminding me where to brace. I grabbed it and tried to take weight off my ankle. The trap grated and the pain flashed white. I couldn't help the cry that burst out. He froze at once, head up, eyes on my face, waiting for the sound to drain. The calf startled, then tucked itself half behind his leg, peeking out the way a human child would. My chest ached with a tenderness so sharp it felt like grief. He studied the iron with a patience that made the trees seem impatient. He pressed the soil one way, then the other. He tested and learned, and I watched him learn. The calf copied him, dragging a tiny hoof through the needles beside the hole, then glanced up at him as if asking, "Like this?" He didn't answer in any way I understood, but I felt the answer in the calm of his body. I kept talking, because my voice was the only tool I had left. "Good," I whispered. "You're so good. I'm here. I'm not going to hurt you." It felt absurd to say it, but I said it anyway, the way you say grace, even when you're not sure who is listening. A hush fell heavy over us, like the forest itself was leaning in. Even the jay went quiet. Somewhere far off, a woodpecker tapped 3 lazy beats and stopped. The big one's ears turned toward a sound I did not catch, then back to me. He lifted his head and snorted softly, not a warning, not a threat, just a note to the calf, a small music that meant stay close. The calf pressed against his leg and watched me with that open, unashamed curiosity only the very young have. I don't know how long we were like that, the 3 of us suspended over the same piece of earth, breathing the same damp air. Time thinned. The iron still gripped me, but its teeth felt farther away. What I felt most was the warmth of the calf's breath and the calm weight of the big one's attention, like a hand on my shoulder telling me to hold on. And then he stepped back. 1 pace, 2. My heart dropped. He turned to the calf and gave that small sound again, deeper now. The little one flicked its ears and looked at me a last time, as if memorizing my face, and then tucked itself behind him, ready to follow. I thought that was it, the kindness fate had to spare me, the last blessing before the dark. I thought I had been given more than anyone has a right to ask, and that the story had closed. But nature was shaping a different ending for me, one I couldn't have imagined even then, with my palm still wet from a wild child's tongue. He returned to the work like a craftsman who had set his tools down only to fetch a better one. The calf hovered a few steps back, head high, ears ticking at every sound. The big one lowered his crown and began to rake the earth again. Antlers first, then hooves, patient, steady, intent. The sound of tine against root was a clean, woody crack. The sound of hoof and soil was a slow grind, as if he were kneading the ground itself to make it softer. He hooked a tangle of roots and lifted. Fibers snapped one by one, each break a quick sting in the air. He tossed the wad aside. Then he dug with his forehoof, pressing outward, shaving the rim a thin slice at a time. The lip of the hole slumped and widened. Needles skidded down in little slides. A beetle tumbled with them and righted itself, stubborn and absurd. I found myself watching these tiny things because I was afraid to watch the iron. He pried again, angling a tine under a buried stick as if he knew exactly where to leverage. The branch lifted. He flung it into the brush. My mind fought itself. One part of me said, "This is madness. You cannot trust a wild giant." Another part, the part that felt his calm like heat on my skin, whispered, "Let him." For the first time, I reached out to help. I clawed at the loosened roots near the trap, yanking and twisting until dirt packed under my nails and sap burned my fingertips. Every pull sent a flare through my ankle, but the flare began to carry a thread of hope inside it. He sensed my movement. He paused, watched my face, then worked in rhythm with me. His push, my tug, his lift, my pull. It was nothing like any language I had ever spoken, but it was still a language. When I gasped, he froze. When I breathed again, he continued. The calf edged closer, emboldened by the calm. It reached out once and sniffed the air above my knee, then stepped back as if remembering the lesson. Danger lives in the ground. A thick root lay across the hinge where the rusted jaws met. He slid a tine under it and pried. It budged and stuck. He adjusted. He used the flat of his antler now, pressing down to change the angle, then lifted again. The root tore free with a wet sound, and the soil around the hinge sloughed away. Cool air found a strip of skin the iron had hidden since the first scream. I swallowed a cry that was half pain and half gratitude. He leaned in farther to study the hinge. His breath warmed my shin. Then, quick as a blink, the tip of his antler glanced my ankle. A hot spark shot up my leg. I choked out a sound I could not control. But with that spark came another sensation, faint as a whisper. The bite of the trap eased a hair. The change was so small, I might have imagined it if not for the way the blood seemed to find a new path under my skin. I held still, every muscle stiff with the effort not to jerk. He went still with me, as if our bodies were one animal listening for the same signal. The calf snorted, a soft burst, and tucked itself behind his leg. I laid my palm flat on the earth to steady my shaking. The bark under my hand felt like old bread. The world narrowed to the hinge, the iron teeth, the warm, dark eye watching me. My mind had room for only two thoughts, and they fought each other like dogs. One said, "He could finish you without meaning to. One wrong move, and he will drive the antler through muscle and vein, and the woods will take you." The other said, "He is helping. He is not guessing. He is choosing." He tried again. This time he moved with a care that made my throat tighten. He tilted his head, brought a single tine toward the seam where the jaws met, and touched the iron like a fingertip, finding a pulse. He leaned, letting the weight travel through his neck and shoulder in a slow, controlled sink. The hinge creaked. The sound was small, but it filled my skull. I felt the grip loosen another breath. I did not move. I did not even blink. He held the pressure a heartbeat longer, then eased back, inch by inch, as if he feared the recoil would hurt me. "Please," I whispered, though I didn't know if I meant please keep going or please do not hurt me. Maybe I meant both. My voice was a reed in wind. He shifted to the other side and worked the soil with his hoof, making the ground fall away from the iron. Then he returned to the hinge, set the tine, and leaned once more, lighter this time, exact, like he had learned the delicate spot and was testing its memory. The trap groaned, an old, arthritic sound. I felt coolness touch a new strip of skin, a relief so sharp it tasted like metal on my tongue. Tears leaked into my hairline. I tried to lift my heel a fraction, and the jaw let me. It was the first kindness my foot had felt since the fall. He kept glancing up between motions, reading my face the way you read weather. When I winced, he waited. When I nodded without meaning to, he dared a little more. The calf stood with its chest touching his leg now, a small echo of his stillness. He slid the flat of his antler under the edge and gave a tiny twist. The metal answered with another low cry. I felt the cruel mouth open the width of a fingernail. A rush of blood tingled through numb flesh. I bit my lip to keep from sobbing out loud and ruining the fragile balance we had built. I could already feel my leg beginning to free itself. I could feel the shape of escape like a door unlatched. And then, without warning, he stopped. He drew back. He lifted his head and went perfectly still, every line of him carved in attention. He wasn't staring at nothing. He had heard what I couldn't. A thread of wind shifted, and with it came a smell that felt like a blade, wild, sharp, old as hunger. I followed his gaze and saw it moving low between the trees. Gray pelt, lean ribs, a head held level, eyes like winter, a wolf. My mouth went dry. The pain in my ankle vanished under a larger pain that had no place in the body. This is how it ends, I thought. Now it's over. I felt the trap again, the earth, the iron, all of it small under the size of that word, wolf. The big one stepped between me and the gray shape without a sound. One long stride, then another, and I was behind him, hidden in the shadow of his body. He grew taller in that instant, ribs wide, neck high, the bell under his throat swinging like a black weight. He was no longer a helper at the edge of a hole. He was a wall. The calf pressed tight to his leg, trembling so hard I could see the shake in its knobby knees. The wolf slowed, not sneaking, not rushing, measuring. It turned its narrow head and drew the air in, tasting us. I could hear its paws in the leaves even from where I lay, the dry whisper of them, the patience of them. The moose lifted his chin and filled his lungs, and a sound rose out of him that I felt before I understood. It was a deep, guttural roar, a bellow from the root of the forest, not loud so much as heavy. It rolled through me like a wave. The wolf stopped and stepped back. In that moment I understood. He had taken me into his herd. My eyes stung. I had no right to that protection, and yet I was inside it, wrapped in it like a cloak. The wolf began to circle, never breaking its gaze. It kept the wind in its favor, clever, patient, ready to wait for a misstep. The big one turned with it, always keeping his body between us and those eyes. He pawed once at the ground, not scraping like before, but stamping. An answer, a line drawn. The gray shape tested that line. It slid in a little, shoulders rolling, lips just showing the edge of a tooth. The moose dropped his head and took a short, explosive step forward. Not a charge, but the start of one, a promise of the rest. The air seemed to crack. The wolf flinched and retreated 2 paces, angling to find another approach. The calf made a small sound I felt in my own throat. The big one shifted to shelter it without looking, as if he had eyes in every part of him. I could smell the wolf now, dust, old leaves, something like iron. I tried to make myself flatter against the ground. My hands dug into the dirt. I wanted to disappear, but I couldn't stop watching the big one watch over us. He stood so still until stillness wasn't enough, and then he moved with a purpose I would have called human if it hadn't been more than that. The wolf eased closer again. The moose answered with a different sound this time, a short grunt, like a warning whispered in a baritone. He swung his antlers just enough to show their reach. The wolf's eyes tracked those tines, calculating. It made a small, almost polite turn, feinted left, slid right, seeking the calf, seeking me, seeking a weak spot. The big one mirrored it, relentless. There was no weak spot while he stood there. A gust carried our scent straight to the wolf's nostrils. It sneezed, shook its head, and lifted its lip in a thin, unhappy smile. I watched the muscles in its foreleg bunch. I couldn't breathe. My heart thudded hard enough to make the trap rattle. The big one heard that sound. He answered by stepping forward, 1, 2, 3 heavy steps, each landing where the wolf wanted to put a paw next. The wolf gave ground, not panicked, but reconsidering the math. I whispered, "Don't leave me," and hated myself for needing a wild thing this way. He flicked an ear back the smallest degree, as if my voice had brushed it. The calf nosed his flank and then glued itself to him again, tiny chest rising and falling like a sparrow's. The wolf sat. It looked at us for a long time with a flat, intelligent stare, like a man at a table deciding how much trouble his hunger is worth. Then it stood, paced 2 slow arcs, and tried once more to take the wind. The moose cut it off with his body, bell swinging, ears sharp, hooves set. He did not bellow now. He waited. He dared. Something shifted that I couldn't see, but he could. Maybe the wolf decided the calf wasn't small enough. Maybe the antlers looked longer from where it was. Maybe the sound from the moose's chest still rang in its bones. It took another step back, then another, lips covering its teeth again. It turned its head, and the moment loosened just a little, like a fist unclenching. I was shaking so hard I thought I would shake the whole forest apart. Shock and gratitude rose and crashed in the same breath. He was guarding me from a predator that had every right to be here and every reason to try. He held the wolf off like he had done this his whole life, and maybe he had. For a heartbeat, I believed the spell was over, the lesson finished. I thought now he would leave me where I lay, and the wolf would find another trail, and I would be left to the trap and the pain and whatever people might come upon me later, if they came at all. I thought he would vanish back into his world, having given me more than any creature owes another. But he did something. Then I would never have believed if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. He lowered that great head again, and the world narrowed to iron, antler, breath. He set a single tine against the seam where the rusted jaws met and tested it, the way you'd test a door with a stuck latch. Then he turned his neck, not a shove, not a hit, just a careful twist that sent his strength through bone and into metal. The hinge complained, a low groan. I felt something ease, small as a sigh, real as rain. He adjusted a fraction, finding the angle as if the trap itself had told him a secret. He leaned again, slower, truer. The iron's teeth opened the width of a fingernail. Cold air slid across skin the trap had hidden, and my whole body shook with the shock of it. I didn't dare move. He held the pressure, steady as a hand, while I counted heartbeats to keep from crying out. Then, with a breath I felt more than heard, he shifted his head the other way. The hinge gave another grudging click, and the jaws relaxed. I swallowed a sound that was half sob, half prayer. The world brightened at the edges. He drew back and watched my face. When my breath leveled, he set the tine again. This time he didn't push. He pried, levering the bar up by a hair and holding it there while I did the only thing I could. I pulled, fingers slipping, nails packed with dirt. I clawed at the curved jaw and dragged my leg through the smallest opening it had given me. Skin scraped. Fire shot up my calf. The jaw bit again on nothing but air. The trap was open. For a moment I couldn't understand what my body was telling me. The pain roared so loud it drowned out everything else, and then beneath it, a strange blankness. My foot was free, but it wasn't mine yet. It was a numb, heavy thing that throbbed at a distance, as if it belonged to someone lying a few feet away. He didn't move. He stood with his chest broad and his legs set like posts. The calf tucked itself against him, safe and shaking. I pressed my palms to the dirt and tried to sit up, and a dark wave passed over my eyes. When it cleared, he was still there, watching, ears alive to the forest, eyes fixed on me. I have to get out, I told myself, as if words could lift me. I curled my elbows under me and pushed. The world tilted. I slid, helpless, and my heel brushed the iron. White light flashed. I choked on a cry and froze. The big one answered by shifting a half step closer, his shadow falling over me. He lowered his shoulder to the rim of the hole, near enough that I could reach him if I dared. I dared. My hand found his hide, warm, dense, alive. The first touch was like touching the surface of a river. Shock, then movement under my palm. He didn't flinch. He stood. I slid my other hand up, searching for something to hold, and my fingers found the tough, coarse hair at the base of his neck. I pulled myself up inch by inch, teeth clenched, breath hissing, until my ribs met the rim. My leg dragged behind me like a log. The calf watched, head cocked, eyes round and wet. He shifted again, slow, deliberate, setting his body as a brace. I leaned more of my weight into him because there was nowhere else to put it. I held on to the wild animal as if he were my own family. The forest smelled of crushed needles and cold iron and him. My cheek pressed his shoulder, and I felt the steady music of his breath. He was a wall and a bridge at once. I inched my good knee under me and tried to stand. My foot touched down and buckled. Pain blew through me like wind through a broken door. I would have fallen back into the hole if he hadn't been there. He didn't budge. He took my weight like he had always been meant to carry it. "Easy," I whispered, as if he needed telling. "Easy." The word was for both of us. We moved together, his small shift, my small rise, like people learning a slow dance. He stepped an inch. I drew my useless leg forward, that same inch. He paused. I breathed. He angled his body to block the hole and give me earth I could trust. The calf stayed close enough to touch, but when my hand drifted its way, the big one flicked an ear and the little one stilled, as if the lesson mattered even now. Watch, stay, wait. When I finally stood fully, the sky seemed too big. My vision swam at the edges. I clung to him, fingers tangled in his coat, forehead resting against the warm rise of his shoulder. He smelled like bark and rain, and something old that had nothing to do with me. The world went quiet, except for the sound of our breathing. I tried a step. My foot found the ground and didn't hold me. I sagged, and he set his leg to catch my hip. I was an old woman draped over a wild monarch, and the humiliation I should have felt never came. Only gratitude did. I don't know how long we stood like that, me hanging on, him holding me up, the calf pressed close as if my shaking might shake it too. He nudged a fallen branch toward me with the flat of his antler, the way he had before. I understood this time. I bent, almost fell, caught myself on him, and hauled the branch up to my chest. It was long and forked, the makings of a crude crutch. I wedged it under my armpit and tested it. The wood bit my palm. The pain in my ankle roared again and then settled to a thick throb. I took another step. The crutch held. He stayed. I took a third, and the ground tilted and steadied. He matched me, not leading, not following, beside me like a companion on a bad road. We edged away from the trap, away from the place the earth had bit me, and into a part of the forest that seemed to breathe easier. The wolf's scent was gone on the wind. The light through the pines thinned to gold. I thought, this is the end of the story. I am free. He has given me back my foot, and with it, a path home. He will turn now, take his child, and leave me to people and pain and astonishment. But I was wrong. I thought that was the final mercy. There was one more blow waiting for me, the kind you feel not in bone, but in the heart. I tried to walk and the world tipped. The first step held, the second broke under me. My bad foot buckled and I went down hard on my knees, the branch crutch skittering out of reach. The pain hit like a wave-breaking stone. I tasted metal. For a breath I thought I would crawl the rest of the way, dragging that useless leg behind me until the forest finished what the trap began. He stopped. He turned as if he had been waiting for me to fall all along, not with impatience, but with a readiness that humbled me. He stood facing me, ears forward, chest broad, the calf tucked against his foreleg. He did not come closer to crowd me. He did not move away to abandon me. He just watched until the white from the edges of my eyes pulled back and my breath came down from its panic. He took one slow step and looked over his shoulder. Not at the path, not at the trees, at me. It was the clearest invitation I have ever been given. Come. This way. I fixed my hands under me and pushed, finding the branch with my fingers, hauling it back into my palm as if I were reeling in a rope to life. I set it under my arm, planted my good foot, and stood again, shaking like a leaf that refuses to fall. He walked, and every few paces he turned his head to be sure I was still there. When he caught me lagging, he slowed until I found him again. When I wavered, he paused and let me lean my weight on the air between us. He did not lead like a thing that doesn't care if you keep up. He led like someone who knows your pace and walks it with you. The calf matched him, small legs working hard, glancing at me with that open, questioning look as if it could not understand why any creature would move so painfully slow. The ground was not kind. Roots hooked my boot, stones rolled under my heel. Twice more I stumbled, and twice more he stopped without looking annoyed or afraid. He lowered his antlers to shove aside a low tangle of branches that would have whipped my face. He pressed through tall grass to flatten it for me, leaving a track I could trust. Once, when I swayed too far, my shoulder touched his flank. He did not flinch. He simply shifted the smallest bit to take the balance I was losing. We moved like that for what felt like a long winter of minutes. The forest changed as we went. The trees grew thinner. The light sharpened and widened. Birdsong picked up, the kind I recognized from the edges of fields. Far off, so far I thought at first I was wishing it, there came the faint clank of a bucket, the bark of a dog, a voice thrown lazy and human across the air. I stopped and leaned on the branch and cried without a sound. Home lived in those noises. People did. I had not realized until that instant how far from both I had slipped. He waited with me. The calf blew a small breath through its nose and stamped once in the needles like it had never hurt a dog. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. Almost, I told them both, and felt foolish and right at the same time. We went on. The scent of smoke came thin and sweet. I could hear a gate creak. The forest floor sloped, and the old cart path showed itself at last, two pale ruts etched through grass and sand. It looked like a riverbed to me. It looked like a road to everything I had ever loved. I stepped onto that path and swayed. My body wanted to collapse with relief. He didn't join me. He took a half step back, as if he had come to a border he wouldn't cross. He stood with one hoof on the leaf mold and one on the scraped earth of the wood's edge, and in that stance I felt something I won't be able to name even when I have had years to think about it. It was not fear of what lay past that line. It was a choice. This far, no farther. I turned to face him. The calf was close to his leg again, pressed there as if to keep his courage, though it seemed to me the courage was mine to hold now. The big one raised his head and looked at me, and in that look there was a goodbye and gratitude. It sat me back a step. Gratitude? For what? For staying still, for trusting, for learning the shape of danger with him and the little one? My heart pounded so hard it hurt. The branch under my arm creaked with the press of my weight. He blinked slowly, the way you do when you want someone to know you see them. He shifted his weight, and the bell under his throat swung once, a dark pendulum with no sound. He breathed out, and the breath carried the resin smell of pine and something like rain. He did not look at the path again. He looked only at me, and I felt the strangeness of being seen by a thing that owed me nothing. "I'll be all right," I said, though the truth was I didn't know if I would. My ankle throbbed, my hands shook, my chest felt empty and full in the same second. "I'll find them." He did not understand the words, or he understood them too well. He stood, and the calf stood, and we occupied that line together, the place where his world ended and mine began. I wanted to shout thank you, to fill the trees with it, to pour it into his ears like water. I opened my mouth, but the words stuck in my throat. I turned once more, because I had to, because some thread still ran between us. He was there on the edge of the woods with the calf pressed close to his leg, the trees behind him like a dark curtain. He stood half in shadow, half in light, as if the forest itself was deciding whether to let him go. He lowered his head in a small, deliberate dip, no flourish, no show, a nod. I felt it land inside me like a hand on the shoulder. That simple motion broke whatever was left of the wall I kept around my heart. In that nod, I heard what I could not have heard any other way. "I see you. Go, live." My chest ached with a new kind of fear, the fear that comes when the world shows you it is larger and kinder than you were ready to believe. He had not only saved me, he had brought his young into danger to do it. He had stood between us and a hunter older than stories. He had offered his body as a brace and opened iron with bone. The truth of it struck me so hard, my knees unlocked. I sank to the path, the branch jutting away uselessly. The grit bit my palms. Tears came in a rush that had nothing to do with pain. I was crying because the order I thought I knew had shifted. I was crying because I had been held safe by something that owed me nothing. I looked up through the blur and saw the calf lift its small head to look at me. It took one tentative step, then stopped when the big one breathed out through his nose. The calf leaned into him again, not out of fear, I think now, but because that was their language for stay close. Remember this. I pressed my hand to my mouth to hold in the sob, and the taste of salt made the world sharper. There was no noise but our breathing, and far away, the thin clatter of a gate, a dog's bark braided with a man's shout. The sounds of my life lay just down that path, but for another breath I stayed turned toward the woods, because I could not yet bear to turn my back on the miracle that had carried me here. He waited. He didn't fidget, didn't stamp. He was as still as a thought you don't want to lose. I felt the weight of his waiting, and understood that it was a gift too. He would not cross into my world. He would not ask me to cross back into his. He would only see me safely to the line and hold the door open with his body. I tried again to say thanks. My mouth opened. Nothing came. The words were too small, too human. They felt like pebbles in a river, too wide to notice them. I pressed my palm to my chest instead, a gesture any child could read, and he blinked once, slow. In that blink I felt the shape of a promise. No debt between us, no tally. Just what was done, and the knowing of it. A gust ran along the path and swung the branch crutch against my leg. The touch pulled a streak of fire from my ankle to my hip. I hissed through my teeth and grabbed the wood. The moose lifted his head, ears tipping forward, then settling. I could almost hear the thought in him. Now you go. The calf pinned its ears and looked at my stick like it wanted to challenge it, then thought better and looked back up at him. I pushed myself to my feet, awkward and shaking, the world tilting and righting around me. I set the makeshift crutch, took a breath, and stepped backward once so I could keep my eyes on him a second longer. The path behind me felt like warm water. The forest in front of me felt like a cathedral. I didn't deserve either feeling, but both filled me anyway. He did one last thing then, something so small it might have been nothing if I hadn't been looking straight at him. He shifted his weight and turned his head to the calf. not away from me, but past me, and then back to me again. It read like a sentence, simple and whole. I have what I came with. You have what you need. We are finished. My throat closed. The fear that filled me then was not the fear of wolves or iron. It was the fear of beauty, the kind that knocks you down and makes you feel tiny and held at the same time. I bent under it. My knees hit the path. I put my hands on the earth and let the tears come as if I were pouring something out that I had carried too long. The grit stuck to my palms, and I pressed them harder because I needed to feel the world as it was, solid, cold, unarguable, so I could accept what I had seen inside it. If someone told me this, I said to the empty air, to the trees, to him, I would not believe them. My voice sounded like it belonged to another woman, a younger one or an older one, I couldn't tell. The calf flicked its ear. The big one stood without a tremor. He looked at me with that same steady gaze he had used to hold me together when iron held me apart. He looked at me the way not every person knows how to look at another person. He looked at me like one of his own. If someone told me this, I said again, because the words needed a second life, I would not believe them, but I saw it myself. A wild creature saved me. He looked at me in a way a human doesn't always look at their neighbor, and I know now, nature is wiser than we are. I wiped my face with the heel of my hand and tried to rise. The noise of people grew closer, bending around the trees like a current. When I stood, he stood taller for a breath, not to threaten, but to complete the picture of himself in my memory. Then he took one step backward into the green. The calf went with him, a small shadow glued to a larger one. They did not rush. They did not hide. They simply dissolved into their world the way rain dissolves into soil. I thought that would be the end. I thought the path would swallow me, and the village would carry me, and the day would become a story I barely recognized when I spoke it aloud. But even as I turned toward the voices and the smoke and the hands I hoped would catch me, I felt the aftershock roll through me, the quiet, impossible knowledge that what had happened would not ever let me go. They found me on the path because I was crying and could not make myself stop. A man with a red cap came first, his dog pulling him, the bell on the dog's collar clinking like a tiny church. He bent over me and said my name, though I had no idea who he was. Then another voice, a woman with a jacket tied at her waist saying, "Easy, easy, we've got you," and a third voice calling down the hill for help. Hands touched my shoulders, my wrists, my face. Someone slid an arm behind my back and lifted me to sit. I gripped the branch like a child grips a railing. I turned to the woods once more. The edge was only trees and shadow. He was gone. The calf was gone. The line between their world and mine had closed like water. "Don't move," the man said. "You're safe now." I shook my head, because safe had worn a different shape that day. "A moose," I said. "He brought me here." The man looked at the woman over my head. People make that look when a story is too big to hold. They saw the trap when they followed the churned ground back a little way. They saw the torn needles, the gouges where antlers had worked, the iron mouth open like a rusted grin in the dirt. The dog sniffed and whined and leaned against my knee. Someone said, "That thing is ancient." Someone else said, "Who leaves metal like that in these woods?" No one said anything about a moose who could pry. When they lifted me, I screamed once and then was too tired to do it again. They made a chair with their arms and carried me up the path in short, careful steps, swapping places when they had to. The sky tumbled over their shoulders. The woman kept saying, "You're all right, you're all right," like a song. I kept saying, "I held on to a wild animal. He saved me." At the road there were more people and a car that smelled like rubber and dust. A boy stared at the blood on my sock until his mother turned his face to her coat. Someone pressed a bottle of water into my hand and told me to sip. I said, He stood between me and a wolf. The words sounded foolish in the open, like coins in the wrong currency. The man with the red cap patted my shoulder as if to say, "You're in shock." He was right and wrong at the same time. At the clinic, they cut my boot away, and the doctor with gentle eyes said words that mostly meant, "You will keep the foot." He said swelling and bruising and time. He asked me what happened. I told him. He said, "You were lucky." I said, "I was not lucky. I was saved." He wrote something on a chart that did not spell saved. He gave me a blanket even though it was not cold. He left the door open, and down the hall I could hear a radio humming a tune I knew when I was a girl. People came to the bed and left it. A neighbor, my niece, the woman from the path, the boy who had looked at my sock now peeking from behind a magazine. I told each of them the same sentence because it was the only true sentence I owned. I held on to a wild animal. He saved me. Some nodded the way you nod when an old woman needs comfort. Some said, "I believe you," and their voices were kind even if their eyes were doubtful. One man said, "They are dangerous. You were lucky he did not kill you." I closed my eyes because I did not want to use anger on a day like that. When I slept, I dreamed of iron and water and eyes that saw me without judgment. When I woke, my hands still smelled like him, a warm, resin smell I could not wash away with soap. I pressed my palms to my face and cried again, softer now, the way you cry when the body is tired and the soul is still raw. Later, when the swelling eased and I could hobble from the bed to the window, I watched the line of trees at the far end of the parking lot as if they might open. Pine, birch, pine, sky. No moose could stand there without the world stopping, and still I watched. A nurse asked if I wanted the shade drawn. I said, "Please leave it." I wanted the chance to see what I knew I would not see. When they brought me home, the house felt smaller than before and kinder. The table sat where it had always sat. The kettle took the same time to boil, but every object looked like it had been moved a hair to make room for what I carried. My niece made soup. She said, "You need to write this down." I said, "I do not know letters strong enough." She took my hand and squeezed it. Her palm was warm like his shoulder had been. That night I dreamed another dream, not of iron this time, but of the little one. It licked my hand again, and I woke with my palm open, like I was still receiving that small gift. I lay in the dark and let the quiet gather. I thought about the hinge giving, the pressure easing, the way he had turned his head to check on me without making a fuss about it. I said thank you into the empty room, because sometimes you have to say it twice, once with the mouth, once with the heart. If your heart is skipping now, you understand. Subscribe to the channel. Here we tell the truth about nature. People asked to hear the story, and I told it again and again, each telling the same shape. I did not try to decorate it. I did not try to sell it. I said what happened. I said, he stood between me and hunger. I said, he opened iron. I said, I leaned on him as if he were my own. I said, he brought me to the path and would not cross it. I said, he looked at me the way a person should look at a neighbor. Some cried. Some laughed a little the way people laugh when they are afraid of crying. A few said, it cannot be. And then they went quiet, because sometimes the soul understands before the mind allows it. We went back with the man in the red cap a week later when I could walk a little with a cane. The trap lay where it had lain, its mouth open, useless now except as a lesson. The ground around it had the story printed into it, scuffed earth, snapped roots, a line where a hoof had ground the soil, marks on bark at the height of antlers. The man touched one gouge and whistled low. He did not say he believed me, not in words. He did not have to. We stood there for a minute that felt like a prayer. Days passed. The world kept to its chores. I boiled water, folded towels, counted pills, opened the door to let the morning in, shut it to let the night back out. But something in me did not return to its old chair. It stayed at the edge of the woods, watching. It stayed where a wildlife had chosen to help me and to risk his young to do it. If someone told me this, I would not believe them. I saw it myself. A wild creature saved me. He looked at me the way not every human knows how to look at another human. And I know now, nature is wiser than we are. Since then, every time I hear branches crack in the forest, my heart stops. Maybe it is him. If you also believe in a special bond with animals, write, "We are not alone in this world."